Welcome to Colonie TV, the governmental educational channel for the town of Colonie. Hello and welcome to The Money Factor. I'm Richard Naylor, your host. Our guest today is Chretien Voerg. He is the director of the Pure Waters Department for the town of Colonie, and we're going to be looking at some of the things that we take for granted and hopefully make us think about them a little more. I want to welcome Chretien to the show.
Thank you, Richard. I'm excited to be here today and to talk about some of the great services that our division provides to the people of the town of Colonie.
And they're so basic that we tend to forget about them until they're not there.
Absolutely.
Or we look at TV and we see what happens in I can't remember the name of the village, but right now the Philippines, where, or Haiti was a good example, where you start worrying about diseases.
Absolutely, and that's really why the Division of Pure Waters is here. And it's probably our mission statement is to protect the public health and the environment through the safe, effective, and efficient collection, transportation, and treatment of sanitary wastewater in the town of Colonie. And our mission statement really sums up why we're here. Protecting the public health is a key component of what we do in Pure Waters because wastewater into itself is laden with pathogenic microorganisms that cause serious diseases and can really damage the environment. These diseases like cholera, dysentery, typhoid fever are almost unheard of in the United States anymore. But when you talk about the developing world, you can see these diseases particularly develop after major storm events or after environmental catastrophes such as hurricanes, even earthquakes, where water and wastewater treatment services are disrupted, tends to generate more population issues with pathogenic organisms.
And that's what people really start to worry about shortly after a major disaster like we had in Haiti or the Philippines.
Yes, and fortunately for us, we do not see those often here in the United States. But even just 100 years ago, before the Federal Water Pollution Control Act, before the Clean Water Act, in the early 1900s, the infant mortality rate in the United States was 30%. So almost 3 out of 10 children died before their first birthday. And 100 years later, in the early 2000s, that rate had dropped to less than 1%. In the developing world, 17% of the population still does not make it to their first birthday. And though we don't discount the important aspects of vaccinations and antibiotics, it was actually attributed to water and wastewater treatment as the single greatest public health advancement since 1840. And that was really attributed by the medical community, had determined that even in addition to all of the great medical advances we had, the ounce of prevention is really the most critical factor in protecting the public health. And that's why we're here.
And that article was so recent.
Yes, yes. It was an exciting news story for us in our field as a field in wastewater where most people do not even want to discuss our operations, much less the problems or the solutions that go along with it. It was nice to have such a prominent article written about our industry.
Well, let's before we get too far into either the processes that you use or other aspects that our society have to deal with and that this plays a role in. I just wanted to touch on what's your background? What do you bring to the table when it comes to running the department?
Oh, well, thank you. For me personally, I have degrees in engineering science and engineering. I'm also a New York State licensed professional engineer. And I have prior experience in consulting fields in a local firms and also international firms before taking a job about 15 years ago with the town of Colonie.
And thank you for staying.
Thank you, thank you. But wastewater treatment in particular is not a one-person job. It takes a variety of people, scientists, engineers, maintenance people, mechanics, operators, in order to get the job accomplished. So we have a great variety of people in our division, educated, experienced personnel who repair pumps, who repair pipelines, keep things clean. They also operate the treatment plant. They are certified operators through the New York State Department of Environmental Conservation.
So there's a lot of biology and chemistry, I would think.
Absolutely. Biology, chemistry, microbiology, hydrology. There are many areas of science that are involved in water and wastewater treatment. Right. It's an exciting field. It's definitely a high-tech field that many people...
Which you don't think of.
No, absolutely not. Most people don't even want to think about it, much less how exciting it really is.
Right, right. Well, we call it pure waters,
We do call it pure waters because that's what we make it.
and that's the goal.
Our goal is to provide a clean, reliable water source to the people of the town of Colonie.
Now, this is just kind of an aside, but I personally have often had a problem distinguishing what Latham water does and what pure water does. Now, I obviously understand the difference between the kitchen sink, where I'm getting water that I drink, and water that's wastewater. But in the middle, there's a lot of, I guess, confusion, I think, about what one person does and what the other department does.
And it may be a simple issue with the names of the departments. With Latham Water being the domestic water supplier to the town, they provide our drinking and tap water, and Pure Waters being the sanitary sewer department, taking the water, the waste, away from homes and businesses within the town and treating it before release into the environment.
Now, those two departments, one is dealing with water that we want to use that needs to be clean, and we may drink it or cook with it or something like that. Water that we're pulling into our taps or actually out of our sprinkler system outside. The other one is stuff that goes out of our house after we've done something with it. But in between, there's still a lot of water in the world. And I think that's where my confusion comes, where the rain comes down, it falls on the ground, it goes into little square things out in the street. Now, how do you break these three things apart? You've got water coming in, obviously, from Latham Water. You've got sewage going out, which goes to you, but you've also got water running off your ground and into grates.
You're absolutely correct. That's the third component of the operation. Sanitary sewage, storm sewer, and drinking water. And we've already addressed the water component from Latham Water, the great source that they provide to us as a community. But the waste is actually into two categories. Storm water is uncontaminated water that comes from rain sources, from the groundwater. So as many people here in the town of Colonie are aware, there is a high groundwater table. And for many people who have basements, they may see a pump in the corner of their basement that collects water that seeps from under the foundation. That water is uncontaminated, as is the rainwater and roof runoff. And that water is discharged into the storm sewer system, which is a completely separate network of pipes and utilities. Those pipes discharge directly to the rivers and streams in Colonie. Sanitary wastewater is contaminated with the microorganisms and other chemicals that we discussed earlier from toilets, sinks, industrial uses. Those are collected in a completely separate pipe network that are delivered to our treatment plant. So the main concern is keeping these two systems separate not only protects the public health and the environment, but also reduces costs for our ratepayers. Sanitary sewage requires a number of pipelines and pumps and a lot of electricity, chemicals, high-tech operations in order to get that water clean before we can discharge it into the Mohawk or Hudson rivers. Stormwater does not require that level of treatment. So any stormwater that's introduced into the sanitary system must be treated as sanitary waste.
Okay.
And therefore,
however it gets there.
Right, and most often, those connections we find are internal within the home. So people will have their sump pumps or footing drains, which are pipes around the bottom of the foundation, usually underneath the slab, that are designed to intercept water as it is raising from the groundwater source, bring it to either a pump or a pit, and then that water is intended to be discharged into the storm sewer system or onto the ground in a rain garden or other green infrastructure practice that allows it to percolate naturally back into the environment. But there are some people who have a cross connection between these two systems that discharge their storm water, whether it's roof runoff or sump pump or footing drain connections, into the sanitary sewer.
Now, is that legal?
That is not legal.
Okay.
That is a violation of local law. And importantly, that contributes to backups and overflows in the sewer system. So our pipelines and networks for sanitary sewer are designed only to handle sanitary sewage.
How does that happen that some people have connections?
Well,
I mean,
in a matter of convenience in some cases that people may experience this water entering their home into their basement, and as a very easy way to get rid of it is to pump it into the sanitary. Whether they are aware of the issue of keeping these two pipelines separate or not.
Okay.
So we do our best to try to do public relations campaigns with our customers to inform them of not only the environmental, but the economic benefits of keeping the two systems separate. Sewer systems for sanitary are most of the pipelines we have in the town are only 8 inches in diameter.
Okay.
Not much larger than my hand. That will carry
this way, right?
Yes.
Yeah.
So thinking of a pipe that is only about this large in diameter carrying the sanitary sewage from an entire neighborhood.
Okay.
If you introduce uncontaminated water into that pipeline, it's very often that those pipes are not designed to handle that volume of flow.
Which means they won't.
And hence, when we have a large storm event, that can result in an overflow of a manhole and release of sanitary sewage into the environment, or it can actually result in a backup of sewage into people's homes and basements and businesses.
Now, is there a difference between the residential and the commercial?
There are differences between residential and commercial usage, but the systems in general remain
Pretty much the same.
We rely heavily on gravity to do the work for us in getting wastewater from individual homes and businesses to our treatment facilities. So water flows downhill.
Right.
Wastewater is mostly water. So we design these pipe networks to travel at a consistent slope to maintain velocity such that water remains and solid remains in suspension until they get to the treatment
But you must
plant.
have pumps also.
So we have pumps also. At some point, it becomes economically
Otherwise, you're going to be into China.
to 100 feet deep. And
Right.
there are areas in the country where groundwater is not as much of an issue here as in Colonie, where sewers can be 100 feet deep.
Oh.
But because the groundwater elevation in Colonie is relatively high, that changes the depth at which it's feasible to construct a sewer in this
Okay.
area. We have sewers in the town of Colonie that are 55 feet deep. The majority of our sewer network is usually between 8 and 12 feet. In
That
that
must make
general
it
range.
difficult to fix.
It's very difficult, expensive to fix. Sanitary sewers are one of the most expensive utilities to operate and maintain because of the depth of sewer, and we're underneath all of the other utilities. Water, storm sewer, electric, gas, telephone, fiber optic are all at a much shallower elevation in the utility corridor.
Now, you know, there's so much here that it's hard to know where to go first, but because we've talked about the stormwater and the sewage, and I know in the news not too long ago, maybe in the last month or two, there was some talk about the Hudson River and that most of the dirty part of the Hudson, and by that I mean sewage, is around Albany. And Albany, evidently as a city, must have a big problem with their storm sewers and having the same outlet for the sewage as they do for the rainwater and the what do you call the
stormwater and sanitary.
Right, and so they end up overflowing and all kinds of stuff goes into
and discharging into the Hudson.
So do we have that problem?
We do not have that problem in the town of Colonie. Our forefathers, whoever planned out the sewer system from its earliest inception in the early 1900s, had the foresight to keep water and stormwater and sanitary sewage separate. So there are pipe networks throughout the town, even in the oldest areas of town, that keep these two systems separate. However, in older cities, and this goes across the country, not just to Albany, that before the advent of water and wastewater treatment, there was no distinction between stormwater and sanitary. And as a matter of fact, these cities relied on that stormwater to carry the solids out to the river. So
don't need a pump.
So in other words, you don't need a pump. You don't need as much of a cleaning operation to keep those pipelines operational.
You just need an overall drop, right?
Sewage flows downhill. But hence, older cities, whether it's Albany, Rensselaer, Troy, do have issues with combined sewer systems, and those are sewers that convey both stormwater and sanitary wastewater.
So it's kind of a legacy system. We can't really blame anybody that lives there now, but it was just built that way in Albany.
Correct, and that was perfectly acceptable science at the time. During those days before the advent of water and wastewater treatment systems, the philosophy was the more uncontaminated water you could mix with your sewage, the cleaner it would be. So that's how both stormwater and sanitary sewage ended up in the same pipe networks in these older cities.
So that brings me, at least, into a really clear question, I hope. Gets back to what you're doing and how you're treating the water and how you're cleaning it and the plant that we have. Could you talk a little bit about how it's designed, where it is?
Absolutely. We actually have, the town of Colonie owns and operates its own facility called the Mohawk View Water Pollution Control Plant. And we're located on the Mohawk River near the Twin Bridges. But we also discharge sewage to the Albany County Sewer District. So there's a unique geographical feature in the town, whereas there's a geographical ridge that runs approximately along the Northway.
Ah.
And those are called drainage slopes. So town of Colonie is included in both the Mohawk and Hudson drainage slopes. Everything within the Mohawk flows towards the Mohawk River, and everything within the Hudson flows towards the Hudson River. So we contract with the Albany County Sewer District as a consolidated sewer district to treat our waste that's generated within the Mohawk slope, and the town owns its own treatment facility that handles the waste that's generated in the Mohawk slope.
Now the Northway, I think that's what you said is the dividing line, right?
Yes.
That goes all the way up to the Mohawk. So I was a little surprised that that would be the total dividing line. I would have almost thought that it should logically be some kind of curve.
Well, it does diverge. As you approach the northern end of town, it does diverge down towards Fonda Road.
Okay.
So that the very northern end of town is actually in the Mohawk slope. But generally speaking, that ridge line is along the Northway.
Okay. Okay. So definitely South Albany would go.
Yes, all of West Albany.
West Albany, not South, right.
West Albany goes to the Albany County Sewer District, as does Latham, Loudonville, Menands. Those areas of town all flow into the Albany County Sewer District system, and it's treated at their facility in Menands. Our plant is located on the Mohawk, and it's the same unit processes, same chemical, physical, and biological equipment that we use to treat wastewater as they do at Albany County.
So sewage, excuse me, sewage comes into the plant. How does it, could you describe that process, the workflow?
Absolutely. As we discussed earlier in our collection network, sewage flows downhill until it's economically not practical to develop sewers at that depth anymore. And that's where we build these pumping facilities, which is an underground tank that will collect this sewage, and then at regular intervals, pumps within that facility will lift the sewage up to a higher elevation, at which point it can flow downhill to either the next pump station or ultimately to the treatment plant. So the first phase in treatment at our facility is all of the water that's received at our treatment plant is pumped initially. So that on average is about 4 million gallons a day of wastewater that we pump from about 55 feet underground through our treatment process. And in that area, we remove rags and debris, boards, anything that can be flushed down the sewer that can impact our unit processes, damage pumps, or damage equipment, we remove before actually treating the waste itself.
So there's some kind of, is it a filter kind of process, or?
This is a very basic bar. It's called a bar rack, and it is a piece of equipment with tines that protrude into the wastewater flow, spaced approximately 1 to 2 inches apart, that gather rags and debris that would damage the pumps downstream.
So now we're down to 1 inch.
So now we're down to about 1 inch in diameter. And this type of material that's removed is commonly referred to as rags, because the majority of the material that we pull off of this rack is rag material. And these can
Do you get a lot of plastic?
We do get plastics. It's amazing what people will try to flush down the toilet.
Oh.
So anything larger than that 1 or 2 inch bar rack spacing will be removed. And that's where we'll see generally rags, boards, anything that's large in diameter. And once that process is complete, is really where we start the physical, chemical, and biological processes that are associated with cleaning water before discharge.
So there's not a second stage of get the 1 inch to 1/4 inch out or something like that?
No, after that, that's the largest material that we physically extract with these bar racks. But then after that, now we're still laden with a mixture of settlable and non-settlable material. And the next step of the process is called grit removal. Grit removal separates eggshells and coffee grinds and small rocks from the sewage. We use hydraulics to accomplish that mission for us. So we intentionally change the flow characteristics of the wastewater into our treatment plant so that these small rocks and eggshells and coffee grounds will settle out of the wastewater before the water moves on to the next unit process.
Okay.
So important safety note here for our customers, that if you can avoid the discharge of eggshells and coffee grinds in the sewer system, that's that much less that needs to be removed at the
I
treatment
wasn't going to
plant.
interrupt you, but since you went there, I made a little note about disposals, the garbage disposal. Any advice on how to use that? Obviously, I wouldn't put coffee grounds in mine, but I put other things.
No, absolutely. Coffee grinds and eggshells are like loose sandpaper to our equipment.
So peas and beans, if a pea or a bean gets in there, that's not so bad?
That's not so bad. We call that organic material.
Okay.
So material that is not going to be abrasive or solidify downstream, such as grease, would also be something you would definitely not want to discharge.
So wipe your pans after you've cooked, like my wife tells me to do anyway, get my paper towel and wipe out the grease.
Absolutely, and that not only protects our systems and the environment, reduces costs to our customers, and also protects your own internal plumbing, because that grease, as it's discharged into your sewer system, will solidify very quickly, and that, just like your arteries, will clog over time, and eventually...
It's an interesting image.
Yes.
So okay, we're going to be careful with what we put in. Now, you've got it to the grit stage.
We're at the point where we've removed eggshells and coffee grinds,
Okay.
small rocks, and now what we still have some settlable solids that if the wastewater is slowed to a slow enough velocity, will settle out on their own. So the more of that material we can remove, the more efficient our biological process will be later on. So again, this is a lot of applications of hydraulics and physical unit processes to slow wastewater down to a very small target range in order to get these settlable solids
So
to
that's
fall
where
out
you
of
have these
solution.
tanks.
So we have large diameter tanks that are called clarifiers.
So do you switch from one tank to another to allow one tank to really just slow down?
No, we are a flow-through process.
Okay.
So there is no individual unit processes that operate in a batch mode. We operate continuously 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. And another interesting note, we do that autonomously most of the day.
So it's
we are
all
only staffed
automated.
eight hours a day. We're staffed,
Ah.
and then the remainder of the day we are run by computer network.
Wow. Is that the last stage?
That is the beginning of.
Oh.
That is the beginning of the next stage.
Oh,
so,
okay.
So we've removed anything that we can do physically to remove these settlable solids, things that will fall out on their own. Now we're left with these dissolved solids. So material contaminants within the waste that, if the water was allowed to sit as long as we wanted, it would never fall out.
So it's not clear yet.
Certainly
and
not
that's what
clear.
You're seeing
This is
now.
where we take advantage of the biological unit processes and microbiology in order to utilize and maximize the efficiency of waste organisms that are inherent into the wastewater itself.
Okay.
So we optimize their environment. We provide them with just the right oxygen and other chemical parameters that will allow them to flourish in our aeration tanks. And these microorganisms will actually break down the waste on their own.
It sounds pretty ecologically sound.
It's we are maximizing the environment. So we are taking what happens naturally in the environment and accelerating the process and optimizing it.
Great. So the water doesn't have to run through tons and tons of earth to get clean.
Correct. And we do and we use those unit processes, maximizing the environment for these microorganisms so they do the work for us.
Great.
By the end of our aeration process, we have most of the biological component degraded, but now we have this water that's laden with bacteria that did the work for us.
So it's not too dark anymore, but it's dangerous.
It is rather dark, less dangerous, and now it's time to remove those bacteria and microorganisms that worked so hard for us in the last section.
You fire them.
Out from the, absolutely. We send some of them back to work again.
Okay.
We do balance our chemistry at the plant so that we make sure we maintain the optimal food to mass ratios for these microorganisms in our system.
So
But
there's
eventually,
measuring going on all the time.
oh, absolutely. There's an immense amount of water chemistry that's involved. Our operators are certified by New York State. They're all proficient in laboratory operations. It's a very technical technical operation for our staff. And they are constantly monitoring the process and making process control adjustments based upon flow and concentration of waste
So
that comes
is that
into
the
our-
end of the chemical part?
That's the end of the biological part of the process,
but-
where we remove the bacteria. And then lastly, there are those pathogenic organisms we talked about earlier that cause cholera and dysentery. So we add a liquid chlorine solution
Okay.
to the wastewater in order to deactivate those microorganisms as best we can before they're discharged into the environment. And again, we're doing microbiological analyses on this wastewater before it's discharged to make sure that it is safe to be released into the
So
environment.
basically, you're killing those bad germs.
We are doing our best.
And I don't know if a germ is the right word.
Well, it's, I use the term microorganisms because it does cover bacteria, viruses, and other pathogenic organisms that can cause diseases. So there's a variety of different microscopic bugs, if you will,
Right.
that we're looking out for, not only to optimize in our process, but to make sure that we deactivate them before they're discharged.
Now, this is only from more or less the west side of the town.
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
And all those processes that you mentioned take place from the east side of the town with the Albany system.
Yes, it's a very similar operation to Albany County Sewer District.
Okay.
And the only real difference is that the waste at that point is discharged to the Hudson River once
Right.
it's processed. And another chemical parameter for that final deactivation with chlorine, we want to make sure we don't add too much chlorine, that we're destroying the fish in the environment as we discharge into the Mohawk River. So again, it's a lot of balancing with chemistry and microbiology
Well,
to
it's
make sure
nowhere
we're
near
efficient.
like a swimming pool, because when I go near a hotel with a swimming pool, you go, oh wow, let's smell the chlorine, but I don't recall ever smelling chlorine around a river.
Absolutely not, or we would be destroying those organisms we're there to protect. It's a very small range of operating range that we have for our chemical addition.
So we've talked about the joint system. We talked about how it works. What about anything left behind?
There is another unit process we did not discuss in the waste
let's
treatment
do it.
sense. So as we withdraw those settlable solids, as we withdraw that grit, and as we withdraw those bacteria that worked through the aeration process, that is referred to in our industry as sludge. And that is the final byproduct of our waste treatment system. We discharge clean water into the Mohawk, and we collect sludge. That sludge is pressed to remove as much water as possible before we deliver it to the town of Colonie's landfill for ultimate disposal.
Okay.
Now, the exciting part is, once we dispose of that sludge in the landfill, the bacteria and organisms that are in that sludge and in the landfill continue to break down that waste. And as methane is harvested at the landfill and is produced into clean, renewable electricity that's fed back into the grid.
So that sounds like the process.
That is the process, and we do our best to make it as sustainable and environmentally friendly as we can, while still protecting the public health and environment.
So how would you grade the water in the Mohawk? Is it pretty good, or I mean that's kind of a wide open.
That's a
wild
different. I can speak to the water that we discharge into the Mohawk, and
Right.
that we strive for a clean, are well into the 90+% efficiency range in our discharge between what is delivered to our plant and what we discharge into the river.
Right.
But everyone's waste is someone else's drinking water. So we are downstream from Schenectady, which is downstream from another city. So as water is discharged and pulled from the river, it's released again and utilized all the way down to New York City and then out into the Atlantic Ocean.
Awesome.
The water cycle continues.
Now the world isn't perfect yet. What are some of the challenges that you face in terms of going forward?
There are immense number of challenges that the wastewater industry has to overcome, really in the near future as well. We have some operational challenges. We have some administrational challenges. The operational challenges for our staff are dealing with that day-to-day operation. So people having their stormwater connected to the sanitary is definitely an operational challenge. The more stormwater we can remove from the sanitary network, the more efficient we are in our operations, the better we can protect the public health, the less chance there is of sewage backups into homes. And because we need to pump and treat all of the waste that's introduced into our pipe network, The more stormwater we can remove, the more cost-effective we can be in our treatment process.
Now, I would think that the people that do have a connection between the stormwater and the sewage are creating a situation where the water flow is less even. Because it seems to me that what goes into your process, or what should only go into your process, are basically the ongoing things that we as homeowners and renters do. We turn on the faucet, we flush the toilet, and it's not like, although during the Super Bowl you might get challenged, it tends to be more even than the weather. The weather could generate 15 inches of water in a few days.
Correct, and we do see the effects of rain in our system due to these connections. However, there is actually a diurnal cycle that we see within our network itself, because people have a generally set
when they're
pattern.
Awake, for one thing.
And we can see definitely our unit processes slow down at night, and because our systems are automated, we can bring equipment on and offline automatically to handle those fluctuations in flow. Stormwater is a different issue when we do have a major storm such as Hurricane Irene or Lee that do come through the area. Our staff do react to try to keep as much of this combined waste in the system as we can and treat it at the treatment plant before it's disposed. But the more we can withdraw at the individual homeowner level, the better for the community.
Now, is there anything going on in the industry that excites you, or that you think, wow, that would be a great development if we could only do that?
Some of the more unique or innovative features I see coming forward for the wastewater end are just increases in efficiency and effectiveness.
Okay.
So trying to be smarter, more sustainable, more cost-effective in our operations, and that's a challenge for us every day in the sanitary sewer department and Pure Waters. And from an administrative end, that's really what I focus on. Is our largest challenge is definitely our aging infrastructure throughout the United States. Sewers that were, for the most part, installed within the 1900s are becoming obsolete. They're approaching the end of their useful life because all systems have a life expectancy. And we're approaching the end of those useful lives, and we need to start planning for the replacement and rehabilitation of these systems, which then goes into probably our second greatest challenge is our sustainable user rates. So our system, Pure Waters, is funded solely by user rates through sanitary sewer assessments through our utility bills.
Okay.
So
it comes on the same bill.
It does come on the tax bill, but it is a utility charge.
Okay.
So.
And is that an annual charge?
That is an annual charge for residential and commercial properties in the town. We're our utility, no different than National Grid's gas or electric or Time Warner Cable or Verizon. It's just we are a not-for-profit utility.
Right.
So all of the money that is collected through our user rates is returned directly into the system. It is solely used for the operation of the sewer system, and that is because we are established as a special district through New York State law, so that any of the money collected on your general tax bill for the general fund is not used for sewer, and likewise sewer is not used for the general fund.
Okay, I think we're about there. I just want to ask you, you can also add anything that you think I missed, but anything else that people can do to help?
We are completely subject to our users in the system for the stormwater component of which we spoke. But there's a number of things that homeowners can do to protect themselves as well. As we talked before, wastewater is mostly water, and water always finds the lowest point of entry. So when there is an operational problem or a capacity issue due to storms within the sanitary sewer system, the lowest logical point would be the manhole covers you would see in the street.
Right.
Unless a homeowner has a washing machine or a bathtub or a sink in their basement, some elevation of a pipe below the manhole rim in the street. Water will always find the lowest point of entry, and if you've created an artificial low point in your home, then sewage will find its way into your home. So it's very important for homeowners to protect and verify the integrity of their own internal plumbing. And they can do that very simply. In most homes, there is what's called a trap before the pipe leaves the house. And you'll see, if a homeowner goes in the basement, they'll see a cap that looks something like this. It may be made of plastic.
Brass, or is that
And this is brass, and in most cases they are brass. They may also be made out of lead. They may be made out of plastic in a newer home.
Lead is softer than this, right?
Absolutely, and more often than not, the lead ones were used as a replacement for these. I'll show these have threaded connections, so they're a screw-in cap.
Right.
And the importance of these caps is these keep wastewater in the pipe.
Okay.
So if these caps are loose, or they're unsecure, they're off. In some cases, people will remove the caps in order to allow this groundwater to enter into the sewer system. That provides a point of entry for sewage to come out. So it's very important that homeowners verify that these caps on their traps are secure, water, and airtight. And they may also see at some points, they may see a plastic cap or a lead cap. They have to keep in mind that these are temporary solutions
That looks
to
more
problems.
like a seal.
Absolutely. This is just a rubber sealed plastic cap that is intended to be a temporary connection until such time that, that a cap such as this brass cap could be replaced. So homeowners should make sure that these caps are secure, and if they see a mechanical cap, a lead cap, or something that doesn't look quite right, they can give our office a call. We'd be happy to help them secure their system. One of the other things that a homeowner can do to protect themselves is, as we spoke, water will find at the lowest point of entry. So if there is a washing machine or a bathtub sink in the basement, there really should be a backwater valve installed on the plumbing. And this is a device that prevents sewage from backing up from the street should there be a public sewer blockage.
Right.
And this is a small device that can be put on the plumbing in the basement. So if you have just a washing machine connection,
I see a flange.
there's a little flapper in there. I brought a larger one as well, so that if a homeowner decides that they want to have a basement toilet or a basement sink or a shower,
or they buy a house that has one,
they have one, they can make sure that they have such a device installed. This is a very small piece of equipment that has a flapper on it, and this flapper will allow sewage to flow in one direction.
Tries to push back.
And when it tries to push back, the flap closes. Now, it's important that homeowners maintain this piece of equipment because there's a small flapper with gaskets, and as we mentioned, eggshells, coffee grinds, rags will get caught up in here as well and prevent it from operating. So once in a routine,
maybe once a year or something,
or more often if you flush a lot of eggshells down your toilet, you may want to remove the cap and just wash this piece of equipment out in order to verify its integrity and make sure it's operational.
So you would go in with a sponge and just kind of...
Oh, well, the cap can be removed, the flapper can be removed, and a hose or a little bucket of water would be all it would take to keep this in operation. So this is something that a homeowner can do. Absolutely. Always wear rubber gloves when you're working the sewer system. You got to protect yourself from those pathogenic organisms.
Okay, great.
So in addition to protecting themselves, homeowners can also help us by making sure they do not discharge these rags and grease and sludge into the system. So flushable wipes. People are using these cleaning wipes more often now, and you see many of them say they're flushable. Well, they can be flushed, but they cannot be treated at the wastewater plant.
So it might go through the pipe, but at some point you've got to deal with it.
If it makes it to our plant.
Illegal.
They are. As a matter of fact, it is illegal to do that material into the sanitary sewer system. So we're trying to get the message out through doing programs like this where we can educate our customers that the disposal of these wipes not only adds more to the cost of their sewage collection and treatment, but it could also result in backages and block-ups into their home, damage to their plumbing fixtures, and into the environment.
This has been great. I've learned a lot.
Thank you.
Go ahead.
No, that's all.
So, well then, let me thank you for being on the show, and thank you for really explaining some of this, which too often we take for granted.
Richard, thank you very much for having me. I'm glad we could be of service.
Great, thank you. And I want to thank you for watching. I hope you enjoyed the show, that you have a great week, and tune in again next time. Take care. Welcome to Colonie TV, the governmental educational channel for the town of Colonie.